You are listening to episode number 10 of the Happy Choir podcast. Hola people, I am your host, Carlos Cordero, helping you connect with others through choral music. It is officially 2020, and I want to say Feliz Año Nuevo, people. That's how we said it in Venezuela, from where I am from. As you might be able to listen to in my voice and in my breathing. Well, English is hard, so let's try that again. As you might be able to listen to in my breathing, I am a little sick. Allergies are horrible here in Texas. But I didn't want that to stop me from recording this episode and to bring something to you this week. Remember that the Happy Choir podcast is the place that you can learn how to connect with others through your choral music, through your performance, your conducting, your writing of choral music. And recording this podcast, it's a new adventure for me, it's very fun, and I like trying new things. So you will see from now on different structures, different ideas, and I want to see what's best for you and what's best for me too. In this episode, for example, we're going to dive in right away to talk about failure and how to learn from it. Instead of doing just 4 minutes of announcements, I'm going to leave them for later in the episode. The only thing that I do want to mention is thank you for being here. I'm glad that we get to have this conversation, and I want to remind you that we can always continue it in email or in social media. My email is carlos@thehappychoir.com, and you can find me online as @composercordero. Now let's dive in to learn more about failure. Depending on the mindset that you have today about failure, I have either good news or bad news. Failure is unavoidable. And that's actually, as in English, that's a difficult word to say. As failure is a difficult thing to avoid, right? We cannot hide from failure. It is almost required in our journey to learn or to achieve something. Failure, if looked from the right angle, can teach us a lot about how we do things or how we can accomplish more. And that brings me to my first point, that failure is very helpful. I know it might be difficult to understand it because we're used to see it as a negative thing. But to see failure as a tool that will help us go forward changes the whole game. Failure suddenly becomes the path to success. And I heard this interesting thing in a podcast where the best proof that failure is helpful is that you have lived through all of your failures in your life and you have grown. Even the ones that you thought were too painful or too hard to go through and that you thought, I'm never gonna get over this. Guess what? You did it, I did it. We've all gone through difficult times in our life and we are on the other side. So I thought that for this first episode of 2020, I want to begin the year with a healthy tool instead of a false promise or a false idea of perfection. I thought that, yes, it might be hard to begin 2020 or any time that you are listening to this episode with thinking about failure, but this is part of being honest with yourself, and I think that it's a healthy tool to use because, since I said in point 1, failure is unavoidable, it's best to be prepared for it and to know that it is all about the mindset. It is not about failing, but what will you do with it? Before we continue, let me talk to you about Patreon for a second. My patrons at patreon.com get to see my failures, which is scary, but it helps me to share it. It makes me feel that it's normal to fail. They also allow me to have this podcast running, which is a huge, huge help. And I want to give a big shout out to my recent patrons, Julie Jones-Kick and Ellen Kisser. Thank you so much. You are part of this family that we are building in the Happy Choir podcast and me as a composer. When people go to my Patreon, they will see different tiers. If you want a more practical example, imagine that you are inviting me for a cup of coffee once a month. You get to see all my work. You get to be part of this background of my career. Patreon.com/composercordero is the link that you want to check out or that you want to share. That also helps me a lot. Now, let's continue to talk about failure. So, as I said in the beginning, Failure is unavoidable and it's difficult. So let's not kid ourselves and let's say that failure hurts and we need to acknowledge it. To be able to learn from failure, we need to also learn to give ourselves the time and space to mourn this failure. If we avoid this part, we're just putting it off. It will come for us later. This is not the most healthy way to cope with this failure. If you want to cry, you can cry or shout or something, but do it and release that energy that's in you. It is far more English is hard. It is far more helpful. It is far more helpful to do this than getting stuck in regrets and sadness, which believe me, and you probably know, it can last a long time. I can tell you from experience. To grieve the failure and to get up is one of those ways that we can learn from it. Life is not about avoiding the failure, but to take what it teaches you and use it for your growth. For example, for me to fail at composition competition, it hurts. It hurts my feeling, my pride as a composer, and of course I'm hoping to win. But it hurts so much less today than it did 5 years ago, and that's something important for me. I will spend some time being sad and thinking that maybe I could have done something differently, but also I like to remind myself that I didn't fail completely. And it's not that I'm happy that I failed or that I didn't win this competition, but I see it as an opportunity, every competition. I was brave enough to participate and to put myself out there, and I either got feedback or I sat down and made a list of things that I can do better in the next competition. The important point here is that I give myself the time to feel hurt and to feel the sadness or confusion, etc. Whatever emotion comes to you with failure, give yourself the time to grieve it. If you don't acknowledge it, you know that you are lying to yourself and you're not gathering all the fruits from the experience, right? This is also part of the experience. I want to quickly remind you that in the description of this episode, you will find a link to the show notes, and there you can find the links to everything that I make reference to in this episode. Also, if you go to thehappychoir.com, you can subscribe to my newsletter, where you get, and it's free, so that's great. You get awesome content every week, which includes blog posts, podcast episodes, music, discount codes for my website, and much more. Plus, you get a free guide to learn how to be a happy composer, happy conductor, or happy singer. And if that is not enough, I'm also including a $20 discount on your next choral recording. So let's keep failing. No, let's keep talking about failure, but also failing. So in this third section, I want to talk that to fail is better than not to fail. I say this because this means that we were brave enough to do something. And if we fail, that's just the beginning. That's just one of the steps in the journey. Avoid asking things like, what's wrong with me? That's not helpful. Maybe you can think of asking something as you will ask your friend. Is there something that you can do differently? That's more helpful. We're used to thinking that failure is at the end of the line. In fact, if we draw a line, we might put failure at the end of that line, but there is nothing forward. So I like to think that failure is in the middle of that line or even earlier. That helps me to realize that there is much more journey forward, that there is so much more to do. I was just listening this morning that rule of the 40%, and that when your brain tells you that you are done, you're only on your 40% and you have another 60% to do more. So what if that were the failure? This hiccup in our journey, it's right at our 40%. So it is important to learn from failure. What led you to that result? It also helps me to ask myself, is it as bad as I think it is? And I like to remember, you have lived through all of your failures before. To finish this episode, I thought it was perfect to talk about KISS. KISS is that. Phil Daniels, a psychology professor at Brigham University, introduced this idea to help us remember four words: keep, improve, start, and stop. Keep is very simple. It means to know what was successful in this journey or in this project. What do you want to keep doing that worked? Improve means to know what was successful but can be better. What part of the process or the plan or the timetable can you really dig in and make it better? Then you have start and stop. This is as simple as it sounds. What do you have to start doing and what do you have to stop doing? What were the things that you were missing that you can incorporate now? And what are the things that are getting in the way of getting success at the end of your journey? An example in my career is when I write a new piece. When I write a new choral piece, or basically any piece, I want to keep doing the structure plan at the beginning because that really helps me to understand how the whole composition is going to be, even though if I don't know motifs or if I don't know anything about the melodies that will go here or there, I have a big picture. So I want to keep doing this. I want to improve the mental state to work through the shitty first draft. You might have already heard about this idea of the shitty first draft. It's Anne Lamott, Bird by Bird, if I remember correctly. And the idea that the first draft that you do of a piece, of your book, or etc., it's not going to be the masterpiece. It's just shitty first draft. So I want to have a better approach to it. That's what I want to improve. I want to start to know what the everyday composition goals are. I want to go to my office to an idea in my mind of what my goals are in this composition session. Do I have to write X amount of minutes today and they have to sound this way, etc. And what I want to stop is the frustration that I get when things are not perfect at first, which relates to this mental state, right? Of the sheer first draft. But I want to stop this idea of, oh, I must do something that sounds awesome today, or that I'm perfectly in love with it. It's a process. It will get there, where I just need to keep showing up. I want to stop getting up when things are not going my way. That's all. Keep, improve, start, stop. I like thinking that failure leads me to learning. Failure means that I'm not there yet. It doesn't mean that I will never be there. It's just I need to keep going. Maybe somebody that won that competition felt more and learned more from the past years. It's all about keep showing up, and failure can help us get there. If you would like to continue this conversation, you can email me. How do you feel when you fail? Do you think that you can reframe your thoughts about failure? Is it a challenge? Is it easy for you? I would love to learn also from your thoughts. I can't believe I made it through this episode. It was really, really difficult to breathe and really difficult to keep my voice in a place that you will like to listen. And I hope that I made it. For now, I'm just grateful that you might still be here listening to and that I can breathe through my nose. Breathe through my nose. That's difficult to say too. English is hard. The Happy Choir podcast helps you connecting with others through choral music. And I am always open to know if there is a way that I can help you connect with others. So let me know in the comments. If you want to leave a review, I will love that. And see you in the next episode of the Happy Choir podcast. Ciao, people. You've been listening to the Happy Choir podcast. For more information and show notes, visit thehappychoir.com. You are listening to episode number 11 of the Happy Choir podcast. Hola people, I am your host Carlos Cordero, helping you connect with others through choral music. The question that I have for you this week is, how can I help you? I want to know the ways that I can help others to get to know your voice, your music, your artistry in the choral world. Because no matter if you're a singer, a composer, or a conductor, this is your place to learn and to share with others. In this episode, we will dive in right away. 3 questions that will help your career as a choral artist. Ask better questions to get better answers. You might or might not be listening to the difference in my voice. One, I got a new microphone, so yay, I'm excited about that. But also, I'm still with allergies, so I'm so sorry for that. but I cannot control the cedar in Texas, although I wish I could. The Happy Choir podcast is our way of connecting, but we can continue this conversation via email. So I want to remind you that you can reach me at carlos@thehappychoir.com. Now let's ask better questions. In some ways, I feel that this episode is personal because I tend to overthink every step that I do in my career, or at least I tend to use it to do it more. Many times, we sit around with questions that lead us nowhere else than depression or frustration. Have you ever feel that? Questions like, why is all that I do wrong? Why am I not chosen for this competition? Or why can't I write the music that I want? Why doesn't it sound like the way it sounds in my head? Why is nobody buying my pieces? Or what's wrong with me? Those are just a little bit of the questions that are not helpful and that will lead us nowhere. These questions are valid. They happen to everybody, and it's normal to go there. They are valid emotional responses. But there are better ways to reframe these questions and to have a goal in mind instead of a dead end. When I realized that my questions had no place for growing or nothing to go further, I hit the wall that I needed and that I did not know how to deal with. I suddenly realized that all my questions were negative and that they have destructive criticism. It only led me in a downward spiral to watching TV in horizontal mode and feeling sorry for myself. There was nowhere to grow, nowhere to go. A frequent question that I find in choirs, and that's basically their frustration always, is why are people not coming to my concert? And this can actually be a good question, but there are ways to reframe it. When we ask why are people not coming to my concert, we're putting the blame on them and the solution in the audience. You can't control the audience. They are there are more people and they are a vast number of different characteristics and they will do what they want. They will choose the concert that they want to go to or to stay in the house with pajamas. The only reason why I say that is because in Spanish we say pajamas, not pajamas, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But getting back to the question, instead of asking this kind of helpful question, ask what can we do different as an organization to attract more people to our concerts? This already feels better. This question is filled with possibilities. It will lead you to making a list and seeing the actions that you can take now. This list bring us solutions instead of just naming the problems that there might be. If you listen to my last episode where I talk about how to learn from our failures, you also know that we have this technique called KISS: keep, improve, start, and stop. And this question relates to that because you can also ask as a organization what are the things that you are already doing that work but that can improve to attract more audience to your concerts. You can start paying attention to the things that are not working anymore and that you need to stop doing to bring people to the concert. You will also have more time to know what things you have to start doing. And before we continue, I would love to talk to you about Patreon. Patreon.com is a place where you can support artists that you believe in. In there, you will not only be helping that artist, but you can also get perks. When you become a patron, you become part of a community, of a family that supports what I do in this podcast, in my website, thehappychoir.com, and in my career as a composer. Patreon.com/Composer Cordero is the link that you want to visit to learn more. There you will find the perks that I offer, and you can join for as little as $3, which is as if you were inviting me for a cup of coffee. And that cup of coffee is the most helpful that I've ever drank because I don't drink coffee. But what I do is this art, my music, the podcast, the blog, and with just as little as $3, you can help me and help the people that learn with my brand. So I hope to see you there, or if not, you can share it. It is already very helpful that you're here listening to this podcast, which we're going to get back now. A frequent question that I used to ask myself was, why am I not being productive or finishing my pieces? Why do I have this stack of ideas and finale files that never get done. And here's the problem with those questions. I will begin a long list of how incompetent, unprepared, or simply busy with other so called important things I was. After finishing with this self pity list, I realized that I didn't have any energy, desire, or nothing at all to want to do with composition or anything really. I knew then that I wanted to change that. So I created a better question. What habits in my life are getting on the way to be a better composer or to get more pieces done? This question helps me naming and analyzing what are those things that are preventing me from working harder. What are those things that are getting on my way of my most important activities? This question also makes me think of solutions for the problems because I am aware of the obstacle. Once I name the thing that's on my way, then I know that there are possible solutions or there are people to reach to ask for solutions. I could also ask, what are the most important activities for my week? Instead of just thinking, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I have this question that it's really helpful. What must I finish today? What has to be done today? What is that one thing that can't wait and that needs my immediate attention? An important set of questions that we have to pay attention and to be really careful with are the ones that are related to our emotions. Dealing with our emotions as artists is difficult because most of the time our voice, our art is connected to our feelings. This is something very, very difficult to avoid. But if we learn to train our mind to have, my god, I cannot say mind because of my allergy. If we learn to train our mind to have a different approach or response, body response to it, then we will find those better questions. Instead of asking, why am I such a bad composer? With that question, you are not looking for an answer really. You are just beating yourself up. Instead, you could ask, how do I define success? What does success look like to me? What things have I accomplished and why? What can be repeated? What can be improved? Remember, keep, improve, start, stop. What steps can I take now? What's something that I can just get up and go do that will help me go forward instead of thinking on just beating myself up on this mistake or whatever that happened? Instead of asking, why can't I sell a piece or find a commission, which are not the questions that will help you grow, ask yourself what strategies are you using to sell your music? What strategies are other people using too that are working for them, that are not working? You can reach out and ask or just see what's working out there. This last question of other people just reminded me that not all the questions have to be about you or about what you do. You can also ask other people or ask about other people to learn. Before we continue with this episode, I want to remind you that I will leave the link to the show notes where you will find all the links that I mentioned and a summary of this episode. I will also love if you can subscribe to my newsletter because, one, it's free, and also because I will send you content that's specially made for you, for composers, conductors, and singers of choral music. It will include a free guide to learn how to be a happy composer, conductor, and or singer, and a coupon for a $20 discount on your next choral recording. I've only realized that my most soul piece, my most popular piece, now it's one that I recorded myself and that I've shared with my own recording. That's amazing for me. I also want to use this opportunity to invite you to the concerts next month, where two premieres are happening. One is Panoramic Voices, and this piece is called Forgiveness. I wrote the text, it's for choir and strings, and funny enough, Chorus Austin commissioned me for a piece for choir and strings too, that I also wrote the text, and it's called Escucha, which is in Spanish for listening. Listening? Listen. I don't know anymore how to speak Spanish or English, so my brain is fried. But go to those concerts because my brain wasn't fried as I was writing the pieces. So let's keep talking about asking the better questions. And it's funny because I said three questions that will change your career in the choral arts, but I've actually given you around 20. I don't know. Anyway, let's just continue. Ask other people you trust for honest feedback. This is very important, and this is something that a lot of artists recommend to find the circle that you trust or the people that you can honestly ask and that they will be honest with you, that they won't just politely tell you that you are great and that you are doing good, but they will objectively give you feedback on your art. One incredibly helpful question that I learned is to ask conductors for their needs. What are they looking for? In that way, you are not just only pushing the pieces that you wrote, but you're actually responding to their needs. If they say they need a piece about candy and you happen to have one in your portfolio because why not, then you offer that piece, they will more likely be interested to revise it and to consider it for programming. What kind of piece are you searching for? They will probably describe to you the mood or the ensemble that they need. That's really helpful for a composer. Another interesting thing about this question is that if you don't have that piece for choir and candy, because, well, you might have not had time to write it, then you can point out to your composer fellow who has that piece. I mean, once you know what they're looking for, if your friend has it, wouldn't you help them, right? I like to believe that. What's interesting here is that sometimes the solution which we all strive to find is not always in the answer, but it's also in the question that you ask. When we have a better start, when we start knowing our goal and where are we going, then we have a better journey, right? Or at least we know what we're heading to. In this case, knowing the question or having the right question will give you a better path to the answer. I would love to know if there are any questions that you often ask yourself that you don't find helpful or that you don't find that they lead you somewhere. And also, on the other hand, I would like to know if there are questions that you have learned to ask yourself that are helpful. What are those things that get you solutions instead of just beating yourself up? The Happy Choir podcast helps you connecting with others through choral music, and I hope that you know that I'm always open to know how I can help you and how I can help your career in the choral arts. See you in the next episode of the Happy Choir podcast. Ciao, people! You've been listening to the Happy Choir podcast. For more information and show notes, visit thehappychoir.com.